queerness within like it's how we use language is very different from like our straight counterparts. I remember one time in a class I kept using the word queer and my professor was like, am I missing something? And I was like, oh yeah, it's a word that like we use now.
The words we use hold much more meaning than what is listed in the dictionary and can have rather salient implications on our lives. Language can empower.
I think of myself as like a boss bitch and like a queen, I guess.
It can be harmful.
That is a derogatory term.
It can provide identity.
And I identify as queer.
And it can simply be a part of culture.
Then what we run the risk of doing is kind of whitewashing it and losing a sense of history and culture that's connected to these words.
But do slurs follow these same rules? Can slurs against the LGBTQ+ community really empower, harm, and provide identity all at once? Can and should slurs against the LGBTQ+ community be reclaimed? We discussed queer, queen, the f-slur, and the d-slur with young adults and professors at the College of New Jersey to find out.
Queer is literally just anyone that's not cisgender, heterosexual.
I think queer is like a good umbrella term.
It's just like an umbrella for, you know, you're not straight.
It's sort of strange because if you think about sexuality or like gender as like spectrums, then queer really shouldn't exist as a word because it just would be like the norm is the spectrum.
I guess in terms of sexuality, it means like just not fitting the like cishet normative idea of society.
The term queer it's very generational, and there are people that are age 50 and up, deeply offended by being referred to as queer.
Basically, queer is, as it's used in academia, it's anything, queer is used to highlight regimes of the normal. And the analytical category queer helps to deconstruct those norms.
In some ways, so many of these words are thought of as slurs or were slurs and now are embraced by the community. But interestingly, a lot of those words came out of the community and then at some point became slurs, and now we see them coming back as being embraced.
If I call someone a queen, right, that's a term of endearment. But I think it has a very positive usage, especially within the community.
It's great that it's reclaimed, but I don't know if it should be broadly used.
In terms of empowerment, I like that, you know. I think there's definitely a way to use it, and there's a time and place.
I feel like queen can be referred to like anybody. It doesn't have to be a gendered term either. I wish that word was more often circulated than like the f-slur and the d-slur.
The f-slur kind of seems like what a lot of people these days use.
So I feel like because it's been used more as a slur, it's kind of harder to reclaim.
When used in heterosis spaces, it's profoundly damaging because it's not being used in a positive way. It's not being used in a thoughtful way, and the message there is, don't you dare come out.
I definitely have heard that one probably the most. I think that if it were to be reclaimed, I'm not the one who should be reclaiming it.
I love the word faggot. I even identify sometimes as a faggot because I think it's subversive. If you use the word faggot in the more subversive sense, there's a kind of element to it that really kind of just pushes against norms.
If that is the way they want to take power back, then I'm all for it.
I would think that there are places where it would be safe, for example, to use dyke or fag in a community where you feel safe.
I just wouldn't personally use it, but if somebody else who has also been called it decides oh, I feel like I can say this slur because I'm a masked lesbian who has been personally affected by this slur, they can do whatever they want.
You know, I've defined dyke in a particular way for myself, and so you can't hurt me with that. I don't enter a queer space with a fear that queer people are going to hurt me physically. I can get my feelings hurt, but not because some queer person called me a dyke.
I think this is a very, very important topic. I think that unless we pay attention to the ways in which words and labels and categories circulate very specifically in different cultures, then what we run the risk of doing is kind of whitewashing it and losing a sense of history and culture that's connected to these words.
It's important that it's not only the queer community and that like we're not the only ones talking about this. I think that this should be an open discussion and like this kind of conversation should be normalized.
In a way, how we think about things is dependent on the discursive company that we keep. What kinds of books do you read? What kinds of articles do you inhabit? What kinds of theorists are you engaging with, right? And if those are very, very different across the campus, you're going to get very different responses to what these categories mean to different people.